命も燃やし尽くそう。引き換えにってよ、君の力を封じよう。Goodbye, Jojo!
Bleed has really changed a lot since my first video, over a year ago. Not only are we able to actually run more than 6 sinners at a time now, but we've once again had a captain ID power crept off of their team. Just a few more seasons, hi show. Now there's quite a bit to go over, but as for new IDs, I'm not going to waste time on anything that didn't actually make it onto the new team, which means that there's just the 4 ring IDs to bring up, the changes to the team, how good it actually is, and my standard advice of please stop win rating. Ring Mer will be first, given he's easily the weakest of the 4, and also the least connected to the general game plan of the ring. His only effects that care about the number of negative statuses are damage conditionals, and his actual numbers are all pretty reasonable. That said, however, don't mistake that for an insult. He's a good ID, with count on every skill, high damage, rouge on every coin, and a pretty good clashable. You could make an argument for running Prince, or maybe even Hornet over him, but the ring as a faction has quite a bit of synergy, and you really want 5 members if at all possible. I don't have too much more to say on Mer, unfortunately, but I'll briefly mention his S3's somewhat difficult coin reuse, that means it can even clash as a 4-coiner, and is his only source of bleu. Both mulled colours, however, are going to be saved for Rodion's section. As for his unique buffs, Imperfection's Address is just a free damage up for a couple turns once Rodion uses her ult defense skill, and that occasionally restores a pittance of SP. It's free, who cares, better to have it than not. As for the more interesting buff, Le Fauvisme Mas Dichon, I hope that was at all correct, is a really nice set of upsides that Mer turns on after hitting with 10 coins, or very slightly faster with his S3's last coin and reuse conditional. The damage up, extra bleed and sinking potency are both minor, but do help to cement his spot on the team over Prince. The real star, however, is just the free 2 bleed counter turn. While it can be hard to actually trigger against enemies with a debuff purge, adds, or they just have enough coins to burn through the whole stack, it's a major boon to restart the stack again. Finally, Mask doubles his rouge infliction, meaning that once it's inflicted 10, you'll likely be at the full 9 rouge for the rest of the fight. Now, with the boring member out of the way, I can go into the shared traits of the other 3, most notably their focus on having multiple types of negative effects. Unlike the old standby of Ring E, they vary in how much they need for full value, with 3 types being the absolute lowest and 6 being the highest. With how free 3 was back in the day, you might not think much of merely being twice that, but 6 is actually a difficult requirement, or at least not a trivial one. Rodion is pretty different to the Corporists, so I'll save her for last and go over the Guro Enjoyers. As a pair, they're really odd IDs. Charge Bleed isn't unheard of, but unlike the other 2, they're both actually using both keywords and are also good IDs. They have a shared unique charge that is just mechanically identical to regular charge. Instead of gaining charge from skill or coin effects, they almost exclusively gain it from this passive. While the gain might not seem overly impressive, neither spends much charge for conditionals. Besides, they both get to start with an absurd amount of corpus, with them gaining 2 at encounter start for each ring ally. Considering that you'll always be running at least 4 ring IDs, and they only need 10 to turn on their artworks, running a 5th ring, so either Mer or Autis, means you can actually have a charge ID be set up before turn 2. The artworks are both just great buffs, with them providing small bits of power up and damage, with a very slightly higher cap for Hongs, and this line here. This might not read like much, which is fair, but those of you who've played a good chunk of MD might recognise this as just being 90% of the functionality of Rusty Cutting Knife, meaning that it turns all of their potency infliction into both count and potency. Admittedly, their kits are built around this, with neither having a normal skill with more than 2 instances of bleed, but being able to say, my S2 applies a 4/4 stack of bleed with all of its conditionals met is not a reasonable line. The 2 of them are also continuing the theme of Hong and Faust getting to hoard assist defense to themselves. What did Project Moon mean by this? Now, I'll lead with Faust, as she's very slightly worse. Someone had to be, unfortunately. She starts in her Iron Maiden form, meaning she just starts as a +7 defense level ID, with free protection and a regenerating shield, on top of up to 6 bleed count per turn if she gets hit, and a defense skill that inflicts 2 bleed count and does 30 pierce damage, why not? The wild part is that despite all of that, her Iron Maiden is actually just a downgrade over her naked form, so once you spend 10 charge, you auto-unstack her, lose Iron Maiden, gain Self-Unbound, and swap her skills. Self-Unbound is a really good buff. 2 haste and 2 damage up is very silly. All of her skills gain 2 offense level. She gains near universal damage conditionals based on negative effects, and her debuffs all gain a corresponding buff for her. Her S3 also picks up attack weight based on her charge potency, meaning that she will very quickly have a W Corp level S3 with no downsides and 2 to 3 attack weight. Her Clashable Guard turns to a fairly standard evade, with some minor bind and haste, and an assist defense that spends charge, clashes up to a 19, inflicts a 4/3 stack of bleed once she has 3 charge potency, and hits unreasonably hard for something she can do every turn. It's no Faust, obviously, but Albina Faust is just a really good ID. Unless the Lucio ID is way above expectations, she's easily the best of the apprentices, which, considering the quality of the non-middle members, is impressive. Callisto Lu is next, or Ring Lu? Corporism Lu? And he's, pretty fittingly, a more stripped back version of Faust. Instead of having to swap modes, he's simply got an above curve kit, with his alternate skills being saved for more explosive options. First, his S1 just applies an unreasonable 4 potency by base, has Faust's 2 defense level stealing, and her damage conditionals. His S2 is just Faust's alternate S2, with the grand trade-off of 1 offense level, in exchange for this line here. Don't worry, I'll get to that. And his S3 is, once again, just the same as Faust's alternate S3. Same trade of 1 offense level, except the trade here is that you can have the attack weight on the first use of it. Now, that might all seem like he's just a front-loaded version of Faust, with him starting off strong, but losing 1 offense level, which, mind you, would already make him a good ID, except that's literally just the baselines. First, as we already mentioned, his artwork caps at 1 extra base power over Faust, immediately giving a marginally better late game, and his resource passive lets him ramp 4 extra SP per turn compared to his student, while also giving Faust 6 offense level, no clue why so much, on the turn when she does her S3. But that's not enough, you say. He's a nurse father, which means he's competing with Dark Quiet, Fraud Watch, the capstone of the season, and whatever Valentina's going to end up being, so he needs some actual edge over his apprentice. Sure, let's get into those edges. The alternate S2 is just a payoff having 5+ negative effects on a target when he uses his S2, giving him some more charge, spending a little, applying some more bleed, hitting way harder than a random free skill probably should, draining SP, again why the fuck, and applying Corpus Theatre. The last one isn't much, being a slightly sticky debuff that makes the next 3 bleed skills apply more minor debuffs. It's not bad or anything, but a bit underwhelming compared to Callisto's version. Probably for the best though. The other source of Corpus Theatre, and the first once per encounter skill since Full Stop Heathcliff, is Closing Time Installation Art number 1, your flesh and bones as the gallery's seats, is the other reason to bring a bunch of ring IDs, given that gaining access to it requires either waiting a decade for his counter to tick down, or just having ring IDs use skills. To explain what I mean, here's his last passive. Now, this buff also does just randomly give Hong 2 protection a turn until he has access to his alternate S3, but that's not really relevant, and also completely eclipsed by the value of just killing every enemy, while also setting a buff for every ring ID. So, you just have to consume all 21 viewing and you get the big S3. So that's just use 21 skills across all ring IDs. Seems like it'd take a while, right? Well, for some reason, you also lose 2 viewing each turn. No clue why 2, but I imagine it was originally neg 1 a turn, until PM decided they didn't want ring outers to be core to the team again. Thank God. The math is thankfully fairly simple on how long it takes. With just the 2 ring IDs from the House of Spiders, it'll take 6 turns till you lose the whole stack, meaning you can use Closing Time on turn 7. With 3, you spend it all on 5, you can use it on turn 6. With 4, you again remove a turn from both. And with 5 ring IDs, you cap the speed by spending it all on turn 3, and using the skill on turn 4. Until we get to 9 ring IDs on the field, you won't get any faster. As for Closing Time, you're unlikely to actually fully meet its conditionals if you race to get it out, considering that spending 40 charge for 5 potency is a rough ask early, but this is still good even if it is his first skill to spend charge. 5 high damage coins, built-in actual attack weights, no unfocused volley, AoE damage down, slash damage up for himself, some burn, literally just the House of Spiders synergy, and Corpus Theatre, on top of applying a permanent haste, clash power and damage up to all your ring IDs, with those effects being doubled for Faust, so she can just have a free 7 to 10 speed range. In practice, Hongul just ends up being a hyper-consistent ID, who'll always have 2 ways to turn up all his charge, therefore setting up his built-in rusty cutting knife in his first cycle, while rapidly capping his SP, and applying a myriad of negative effects, all on an ID with good damage, clashing, durability, and having the best parts of both an evade and a clashable counter. He's not got the flashy levels of being busted that IDs like Rienseng or Mao Faust have, but he's almost exactly what Bleed wants, helped even further by being incredibly synergistic with the rest of the IDs released around him. His literal only issue is that Hong still lacks good ego options. Dimension Shredder is nice, but it's not like he struggles for charge gain, and his best tool for the team is still somehow goddamn Roseate Desires passive. Now, I'm a little unsure on Rodion's quality. Nothing that I don't know if she's good or not. She's pretty blatantly the best bleed Rodion, and one of the best bleed IDs overall. I'm just unsure if she's the second or third best bleed ID, but I'm getting ahead of myself. The kit. As with Hong, I'll go skill by skill, which means starting with a somewhat underwhelming skill 1. Again, it's not too bad, but I saw a skill with count and a reuse conditional, which had me expecting something like Ring E's S2. Was that too much to hope for from an S1? Probably, but it doesn't change that I'd hoped for a 3 coin. Irregardless, it's a good rolling skill that punches way above its weight class, inflicts 2 counts, and it helps set up for more Rouge. The S2 is thankfully void of disappointments. Instead, it's just got damage conditionals that double its damage, coin and final bar conditionals that bring it to a 24 roll, and while it does lack on bleed count, applies a lot of bleu, some rouge, and the unfortunately named Touch Hardy. This feels like a good time to segue into the Fauvist's 4 unique debuffs, given how interlinked they are, especially as they're the main way you can actually cap her S2's coin power conditional. Multicolour Rouge is the first. It applies a bit of bleed potency to the victim when they get hit, applies some defense level down to them at turn end, and also barely decays. Given how much Rodion and Meur apply, it'll likely be a near permanent debuff, which dramatically helps the consistency of the team. Bleu is similar, applying sinking instead of bleed, and directly lowering the victim's SP instead of applying defense level down. It's generally worse than Rouge, but still good. Hardy is the best of the 4. It's just concussion, except worded more favourably, and actually gets applied at a decent pace, given Rodion's 2 res passive to increase its infliction. Now, all of this is at least decent, but what happens if you apply all 3 onto an enemy? Palais Vibrant is an interesting debuff in that it's the only real way that multicolour gets decremented. At each turn's end, if any enemies have Bleu, Rouge and Arde, they get Vibrant, and depending on how much of the least colour they've got, the amount increases. Now Vibrant itself doesn't do over much. Ring IDs get a damage buff, Fauvist ring IDs get twice the buff, and it'll apply a random spread of bleed and sinking count and potency, but none of that's major. What it is, however, is another 20% damage buff for all of Rodion's skills, a 30% for her ult defense, a 40% for her ult S3, a counter towards her mask, and perhaps least importantly, another debuff for next turn. Unsurprisingly, the S3 is just straightforwardly good. It rolls well, applies 4 counts, caps RD for this turn and next turn, and sets up a 4/4 stack across her colours. Again, simple and good. However, if you can scrape together 6 debuffs, which again isn't trivial, you get to use Burst Forth the Pulsing Crimson under your skin. God, ring IDs really do get the best skill names. Unfortunately, this is an unfocused attack, which does limit the damage somewhat, and you do also lose out on the 2 Hardy next turn, but every other part is great. Given that the target needs 6 debuffs to use this skill, you're guaranteed to cap the 90% on the main target, and play is pretty much automatic, meaning this will be a 130% extra damage attack, with the same infliction as the normal S3, and the final coin hitting all targets. There's not too much more to say about it other than wow, it's good. Now, as for her Master Lu, it's pretty different from Meur's. While they both have the same +1 to potency infliction, Rodion lacks any direct damage boosts, and the count effect is nothing alike. Instead, Rodion gets +1 speed, and applies count to the respective status on hit against targets with 3+ of that colour, once per turn of course. This might not seem like much, which is fair, but in practice, this is just a really simple way to help with the stack. It's not as showy as some other aids, but it's no less effective. She gets Mask pretty easily as well, either by applying Palais thrice, using Critique twice, or using Burst Forth once. Ice? So you'll likely have it by turn 4 consistently. But what's Critique? Does that help her get her mask earlier? To answer that, here's the defense skill. It reads like a much older style of attack given these conditions, but it can do a nice job of setting up the stack early, especially before you've got the ability to reuse the S1's coin. The clashing isn't incredible, but I've seen way worse for a clashable. And if you've got 3+ debuffs on the target, which the game will indicate with this rather nice glowy icon, it also does the same for the S3, you use Critique instead. This is her actual double reuser, with some disgustingly high clashing, some SP ramp up, a single capped point of bleed and sinking, and against a target with 6+ negative effects, you get to apply Touche. This is just a great skill, with the only catch just being the fact that you can't use it while you've got Reflection. As you can see, it doesn't exactly help with getting her mask on, but it's a great tool. The last thing to Rodion's kit is the seemingly tacked on ring student synergy. After Reflection expires, and once spring count at turn start, she'll gain Elamage equals the number of students on field. This then gives you a whopping 1 offense or defense level at random for each stack, and then it expires. If you notice this buff for any reason, I'd be surprised. Oh, and she'll also give up to 2 random students something similar turn 1. Again, this is just pointless. Now, with all the new ring members out of the way, here's the general team I'd suggest. Obviously there's some room for testing other options, especially in regards to deployment order, backup IDs and support passives, but I would like to explain why I am not running certain IDs that others are. The old La Mancha 4 are the easiest to disregard. Gregor and Autis are just bad IDs by modern standards, Rodion is completely power corrected by her ring ID, and Don is just a high damage ID with next to no bleed support. Given that all the ring IDs do both, she's easy to ignore. Prince Mur is the most justifiable Blood Fiend, but still lacks any team synergy without his family, and will usually have lower damage and bleed potency infliction than Ring, while also not supporting Hong or Rodion. I've seen at least one person unironically suggest N-Corp Ryoshu, so I'd just like to ask people to remember that bleed count is still a thing you need to manage, and while Sanguine can buy you a free turn, you can't always use it. You might also suggest cutting the KK duo, and while they're not as overwhelmingly strong these days as they were on their launch, they're still a great source of potency, have reasonable count infliction, and Heath is still one of the best options in a red coin world. You could swap them out, but I simply don't think there's a comparable pair of IDs available. Given I'm late, I'm forced to mention the funky new Ryoshu ID. As you'd expect, she's a really good ID, has several clear spots to slot in, and zero relevance in bleed. Her infliction is mediocre, her count is awful, and bleed isn't desperate for more triggers in the same way Burn is, on top of the obvious issue she has with her defense skill just eating two of your best IDs. How good is this though? Bleed's been pretty strong since Ringy's launch, and while it's had a rougher time with the introduction of Unbreakables, it's more of a double-edged sword than a strict hindrance. Fairly obviously, these new IDs don't bring Bleed to the level of current Rupture, but I'd argue for Bleed still being part of the big three alongside Sinking. Given that the Reflect trials require 3 teams, that works out pretty well. As for playing the team, there are some notable changes from the prior iterations of Bleed, most notably that Lust Resonance is no longer a complete requirement for the team, that Sloth is just not a sin you have access to, and that you do have to manage your debuffs if you want to get maximum value. While you can sustain a full 6 without too much difficulty, it does require making sure you actually rotate skills if you want the easiest line to 6 debuffs. A Palais Vibrant, along with all of its related debuffs, is enough to meet all of your conditionals, but getting it online without having Roger S3 means you'll need to plan ahead, so please take your time in regards to upcoming skills, and read enemy passives to see if they purge debuffs. That all said, however, Limbus is still a fairly simple game, so I'm sure you'll figure it all out without my yapping, and we'd likely all prefer I spend less time telling you things you can already work out, if it means I get a video out within a reasonable amount of time, so I'll cut it short. Best of luck to all of you, and see you in the next one.